You ready, Kim?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, let me share my screen. So this afternoon, I just wanted to introduce everybody to the updated draft model for all of the co-chairs. After the year and a half of work that the subcommittees have been going through each month. And I just wanted to let everyone know that the changes have been colored in orange. And so you'll see them throughout the model slides. I'm going to give you a chance to go through each slide and read through. And I want you to keep in mind, and this is also something that I had sent this draft to you, but also let you know that these are not the absolute final changes, because these are things that there were things within the co-chair, the subcommittee meetings that were discussed, but were not formally recommended. And so as co-chairs, I want you to have the opportunity to discuss different aspects of the model that were under consideration and think about if there are any updates that you think need to be made that represent your subcommittee, and also have the opportunity to go through slide by slide. If there are questions, that is something that we can also address as well. But I want you to know that it is still in draft form. So we'll start with the apprentice teacher. And you can see that there are no changes on this particular slide. Are there any questions about apprentice teacher? And then the initial teacher success program. The one piece that we did take out was whether it would be federally registered or not. That wasn't something that was decided upon. So at this point, we had omitted it. Any questions about that? Okay. I'll go into license one.
Kim, can you back up to the first slide for 1 second? I'm sorry.
Sure.
The first, the associate's degree, or the intent of the 60 credit hours toward a baccalaureate degree is that a person could be at a 4-year institution with 60 credits transcribed. They don't have to be at a community college.
That's how I'm reading that.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And then into license one. Oh, sorry, Hank.
Sorry, Kim. Can you go back one slide again?
This one?
I just wanted to see. I know there have been licensure candidates in clinical residency may qualify. So I know the language has been different as to whether or not one of our EPP candidates in student teaching would get something, or if it's may qualify for. And I didn't know if there had been any talk about what that may means. I think that'll be a question in the future.
I think we kept Maine there because there could be other reasons as far as not being able to get the license that licensure could run into, separate from being in a 16-week internship program. Student teaching. Because it also says may hold classified TA position. So just that flexibility for licensure. Because just because you have one requirement doesn't mean that you qualify for a license. There might be other reasons that you might not qualify for that license. And that happens now with licensure. Does that make sense, Dr. Weddington?
Yeah, I guess I was just trying to think of what what keeps somebody from being qualified if they had made it through the entire EPP and gotten into their clinical residency. I understand they could take a TA position instead, but I don't know how they wouldn't qualify.
We're just saying that that's possible, that's part of the model, that the 16-week student teaching would count towards this apprentice teacher and have that salary.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions about this slide? And then moving on to license 1. And then the second slide for license 1. The one place that it is not the same on your draft that I did change with licensure co-chair this morning was whether the term of the license would be 2 or 3 years, because that's what was discussed during that subcommittee meeting. However, it was not decided upon. So you will see that for license 1 and license 2. Any questions? And then license 2.
And with the license 2 on this slide, I thought in our last meeting we talked about the practical educator evidence review, that peer title. I thought we discussed removing it and broadening it so it wouldn't be so narrow and myopic on a specific title at this point. So that just caught my attention when I saw it in the documents you sent out the other day.
Oh, so you mean the name of the tool?
Correct.
What, during the last joint co-chair meeting? Is that what you're talking about, Dr. Graham?
That's exactly what I'm talking about. I think it was actually Van who raised the point where, you know, maybe we should be using specific titles of instruments of tools at this point, since, you know, we don't want to get into that level of specificity. We wanted to broaden the language and keep it consistent with what we were asked to do in terms of the charge for the subcommittee. So that's what I thought we agreed to do.
Okay.
Yeah, Kim, in my notes, I wrote down that we said that we would have tools that are designed for evidence of impact on student learning. And so I don't know if that's the best way to say it. There might be a better way to say it, but that was definitely something that we did talk about in that joint co-chairs meeting, about instead of having a specific name that makes it seem like we already have a program or a tool that's completely built out and ready to go, to acknowledge that we're looking at having, I think we use the word proxy or placeholder, to give other options for ways that teachers would be able to choose from in order to demonstrate their impact on the students they teach.
Okay. Okay. I vaguely remember that now. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Graham.
Yeah, I might be able to pull notes from that conversation. It was, I mean, the words that I remember were classroom observations and practice-based evidence. I mean, the word observation is a good proxy for what that conversation Anthony's talking about was.
Okay.
But we
can connect separately, Dr. Dempsey, to go through some more details.
Right.
Should we include anything? I know that this is kind of the skeleton high level overview, but should we include anything that indicates that the reason why, like part of the reason for these tools would be, one, to be able to identify teachers' impact on their students. But the other reason for having these tools is to really help teachers identify where they have opportunities to grow in their practice. Should we put anything in there about that, or is that something that would come in the implementation phase?
We can add it in with the impact on student learning if if the co-chairs would like to do that.
Maureen, can you say the first part of that again?
Yeah, what I was saying is I wonder if we should also add something in here that indicates that we're developing these tools to help teachers identify where they can grow in their practice, right? So like by having the peer, that would give teachers the opportunity to have observations and information back from their students that helps them identify where in their practice maybe they need to make some changes to better meet the needs of the students in their classrooms. And so this tool or something similar to it would give teachers the opportunity to kind of delve in and help kind of provide some, I guess, guided reflection on where they need to improve. And then if their evidence on the second time they get those observations or the next time they get student surveys back indicates that those changes that they've made in their practice are benefiting the kids that they teach, that would be a demonstration of the teacher growing, right? And a demonstration of the impact on their students. So I don't know if it'd be helpful for us to add that in at this point too, just to make sure we're clearly articulating that, yes, this is a tool that would be used to, to measure or indicate a teacher's impact on their students, but also built into this is a way to help teachers improve in their teaching practice and grow as a practitioner.
Yes. Yeah, and coupled with that, is to start to identify practices that we might want to transport across different classrooms and schools. So a teacher who's highly successful at a particular element of practice, in essence, becomes a mentoring opportunity for other teachers. As they
absolutely.
As they start to move up into the other licensure areas.
Any other comments on this slide? This is more about license.
Kim, real quickly too, on the last slide, I actually found it in my notes what we had said the last time. We said peer and collegial review of practice as described in intent versus using the acronyms.
Thank you, Maureen. And then one change here for the EFOS score meets expected growth instead of 0 or higher.
Can we go back one second to the previous two slides? Or one more slide.
Okay. Sure.
I just have a general question. I noticed we have the micro-credentials and the observation instrument and all that. I don't, for some reason, it seems to me, and you all can correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like our EPPs are left out of the picture to some extent in this space. I see that they're a sponsor, but am I missing something? It just seems to me like the EPP.
So completion of you mean like completion of a traditional program? Because that takes you to license 3.
Right. And I don't know if it's completion of the program. I'm just trying to get a feel for, it seems like the micro-credentialing replaces what an EPP might do. Where am I perhaps misinterpreting what I see here? I guess I'm just trying to figure out where did the EPP play a role in this space as they do in those previous levels. And I just don't see the EPP prominently featured here. So I guess that's my question.
Anthony, I think, and Hank, help me with my memory, when we were working through revisions and prep and entry, I think what you're asking is, can the EPP be seen as a provider and a resource option? And the prep, if I'm hearing your question right, and the answer in our committee was, yeah, we think the EPPs have a role to play in this, including potentially being a provider of micro-credentials. So what we typically provide is 3 credit hour, credit hour based programs could be restructured in a micro-credential option. Hank, am I, my memory correct on that?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. And then one change here for the EFOS score meets expected growth instead of 0 or higher. I just have a general question. I know this we have the micro-credentials and the observation instrument and all that. I don't, for some reason, it seems to me, and you all can correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like the micro-credentials are left out of the picture to some extent in this space. I see that they're a sponsor, but am I missing something?
Okay, that's helpful. So, because the way it reads, it almost sounds like the micro-credential is like a third-party vendor type of thing, and the EPPs aren't necessarily playing a role in it. But that explanation assists with me understanding how the EPPs could and will be involved at this level.
Yeah, I got to go back to meeting notes, but I think that was in there.
Yeah, and it probably wouldn't hurt right there where we say Darling and Hammond, if there was something in there to say the EPPs may develop these as well, because I think that is a question that still lingers in the field.
Yes, absolutely.
And there is precedent from other states who have worked with their university systems to develop the micro-credentials. I'm trying to find the link right now that I actually shared in one of our meetings. I'll drop it in the chat. But that is something that does happen in other states where their state university system is a partner in developing and offering those micro-credential classes for the teachers in their state.
And we actually have that happening right now. I know State and Carolina have one. We have a small one, but it's a residency license program based in micro-credentials. So it's happening here already.
So this is Tom. May I make a comment on this?
Sure.
So there's currently work going on separate and apart from this work about micro-credentials for professional learning in the state. So I just want to point out that there are two different things that we're talking about here. There's micro-credentials that can be used for professional learning for the purposes of renewing the license, what we call CEUs now. And the state is engaged in a partnership with other states to define what the standards are for micro-credentials. So I want to make sure that we're not putting in something that says EPPs can develop micro-credentials, which I totally agree with, but it would be they could develop micro-credentials for the purposes of renewal credits only if they meet the standards set by the State Board of Education for micro-credentialing.
Yes.
All right.
Tom, the word that we used in prep and entry was vetted. They have those micro-credentials. Doesn't matter who the provider is, EPP or district or a third-party vendor, they have to be vetted through a process to state. Ultimately, that would end in state board approval.
All right. And then my understanding is what we're talking about in this slide in particular is the pathway to meeting. So I'm likening this to anybody with an IPL. In order to convert that IPL to a CPL, you have to pass an assessment of content and an assessment of pedagogy. These particular micro-credentials are here, I think, to indicate here's how you complete those. You can take the praxis, or you can take the EdTPA, or you could do a series of micro-credentials. Those micro-credentials would have to be uniform across the state if they're being used in the license to establish the competency to hold the license. And I think we need to make that distinction between that particular set of micro-credentials that's used for the purposes of establishing the competency to hold the license, and those that are used in general for CEUs for the renewing of a continuing license. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so for this particular one, I want to make sure what I'm hearing is that individual EPPs could develop micro-credentials to substitute as what we're considering, what's right now the requirement is the praxis or the EdTPA.
I think that's, at least from prep and entry, and again, Hank, help me. I think if I go back and look at the notes of the running notes Erin Horn has been keeping, they're not her notes, but she's done that for the subcommittee, that this would be a menu. I don't think the EPPs, at least relative that at the level of license 2, the performance assessments such as EdTPA might not be a requirement. Ultimately, I think prep and entry would say they have to pass EdTPA to move up into, if they were to hold license 3 and assuming to go into license 4, but that there has to be a performance assessment as well as the coursework and or micro credentials and or go back to the phrase Maureen used, peer and collegial review process. That this would be a set of tools, but prep and entry was pretty strong about their performance assessment piece. Hank?
Yeah, absolutely. We've been pretty unanimous on that.
Right, I'm with you. I am absolutely with you. Like, I just want to make sure we're all construing these as alternatives, basically as alternatives to the current Praxis and EdTPA requirement. And it's not to be construed with micro-credentials that meet the state standard for CEUs for the purposes of renewing the license.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and Tom, I also, to be clear for the record and probably for other conversations, I've not been in meetings where I've heard members of committees or I have not read in minutes where people involved in this process have said, oh, we can use the old-fashioned CEU process to hold license 4. I'm not, I mean, if that's been discussed, I've not, or in the minutes, I've not read it. So I think you're right. I think we got to be careful not to conflate what has traditionally been CEUs very loosely defined as compared to what we're talking about here. That those things, CEUs could describe that way would not be able to rise to the level of being a micro-credential or a course for that matter. That we would call something you do in a CEU the same thing as a credit-bearing course.
Right.
I think we're all on the same page.
Okay.
Kim, can I just raise one other question? I don't know if the bullet preparation sponsor, EPP or PSU. This was a pretty strong point in prep and entry around license 1 and license 2. How that affiliation happens and the window of time in which a person has to do it is critical. So if we think about the way residency works now, you got to turn around an affiliation pretty fast. And the HR directors in particular were saying, we got to give more flexibility to the license 1, license 2 candidate to establish that relationship. So districts in essence can get people hired. I think I explained that correctly. I don't know that it necessarily needs to be embedded in here, but that one bullet about the EPP and the PSU, that there's got to probably be more agility in terms of how that person might get enrolled in an EPP program, for example, or access the opportunity for micro credentials as another example to be able to move into that contract.
Right. I think there was discussion around giving them at least a semester to affiliate with an EPP.
Right. Or if it happened to be a third-party vendor, to be able to do that, it'd have to have some time to make those connections.
So we just, again, I'm sorry, Dr. Dempsey, can I?
Sure.
We use the term affiliate here, and I think as many of you know, I've run into some real issues with the General Assembly related to the current residency license, and I think this kind of follows along. the statute is enroll in an EPP. So am I hearing that the recommendation is that we use the term facilitate, affiliate, and have some, and we would like to see that in the legislative changes that gives more flexibility to how a candidate interacts with an EPP during these formative years. Because I would love it if this group was behind me on that argument, because I didn't get much success before.
Hank, we pretty consistently use the word affiliate, little a, lowercase a, affiliate.
Yeah, little a for sure. Yeah, I think our prep and entry committee supports that for sure. And I like the idea of having a little bit more flex time in there for the PSUs. That it was really strong from those HR directors that they needed that extra time to get people into place.
Okay. Yeah, the timing is great. I just want to make sure that if that we didn't want to stick to the technical definition of enrollment, we wanted to move to a little less restrictive definition of affiliate.
Right. And it also, Tom, it connects back to Anthony's question earlier. So by virtue of entering a contract to be a licensed 1 or licensed 2 teacher, you've established a relationship with the PSU. It's that parallel sponsor relationship that becomes part of that process and more time impacted, because you're affiliated with the PSU by virtue of signing the contract.
That's right.
Yeah, that's where that window of time comes up. And it also brings into play Dr. Graham's question about the potential of the EPP being a provider for those professional learning experiences that a licensed 1 or licensed 2 teacher might need or would need.
Thank you.
Sure.
For clarity's sake, what I'm hearing you say is you're wanting to advocate for the affiliate language as opposed to the enroll language.
Mm-hmm. You're asking me, Anthony?
Tom, I was asking Tom just for clarity's sake.
Yes. I very much, this is not about me, but I very much would like that. I think it would solve a lot of our problems.
I can see registrars on our campus in particular being happier with the word affiliate, because enroll could be an action that occurs after you affiliate. But if we use the word enroll means enroll on a university campus. That means you're on a course roster.
That's right. And I think, the EPP attorneys, I think, are pushing you guys hard not to say, to say enroll is a very specific thing. So that gives a lot more flexibility to the EPPs, I think.
Thank you, Kim.
Sure. And then the second half of license 2. And then licensure.
Can you back up one?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
This say, never mind. You just struck it, or it is struck now. Qualitative growth review was the other very specific term. Well, not very specific, but term that has legacy that we wanted to be more descriptive than specific.
Right, and that's something that the licensure subcommittee discussed, that they wanted EVOS. They were good with EVOS and peer, but they had too many questions about qualitative growth review. So they decided to strike that. And you can see down here at this next slide that it's EVOS or peer, and to take QGR out.
So I have one question. If this goes to the state board and passes and then goes on to the General Assembly and passes, and we don't have something in there that would be curricular materials that teachers would use starting on day one and using continuously throughout day 180 to assess where their kids are and use that to drive instruction. Does that, if we don't have something in there that's somehow stated that teachers would have the opportunity to use curricular materials in demonstrating their impact on students, would that mean that that option is completely off the table now if we take it out at this point?
So I don't see that as necessarily true, Maureen, because the way licensure stated it is that where is it? They voted to consider other reliable and valid qualitative or quantitative methods not yet developed. You know,
Okay.
They would maybe consider, and by then it'll be out of subcommittee hands, obviously. But if they just weren't comfortable with agreeing to QGR when they didn't know enough of the details of it.
Okay, absolutely. I just wanted to make sure that we were keeping options in there for teachers to be able to use multiple indicators to demonstrate their impact. So thanks for clarifying that, Kim.
Sure.
Oh, hey, this is
Dr. Bullock, did you want to say something else?
I do. This is Ann. So, as the licensure subcommittee, Maureen, which you were at, we talked about this qualitative growth review, y'all, probably for an hour, because the questions get to be what's enough evidence, all those types of things. And also it had bad feelings from something the state adopted prior, or people were thinking about that portfolio that was adopted long ago and things like that. So we decided to add to have a motion where we say there could be other things, but we don't have anything fleshed out at this time that has this name on it that we would want to, recommend. And then Kim, if you go to the chart, please. Thank you. So one of the things that we discussed was that, and this is kind of a technical piece, but that someone could use peer here instead of EVOS, because there was no option for a teacher. Like there's no option in this for somebody that doesn't do EVOS. It doesn't mean they can't choose one of these other things. And I would go back and argue also that a micro-credential or EdTPA or PPAT would use products from a teacher's classroom. EdTPA and PPAT would, for sure, and micro-credentials could. So just to clarify where we are from licensure.
And before I jump to Tom, who has his hand raised, did the committee talk about it back to the other language where you did the strike through on the qualitative growth review? I liked striking through qualitative go through, but did you talk about examples of what might?
There was conversation around that, Van. We didn't get down to the details. We just said the way it's written wasn't enough detail, right? That it wasn't that there could be something, but we wanted to leave the door open for something if it was fleshed out. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Tom?
Thanks. I just wanted to say that QGR was meant to be a generic term, and I think I screwed this up when I was pressed in some of these subcommittees to define it. I said the only thing I could think of is the ASW process we used. So I tainted that term now. So I agree that term needs to be taken out, but the idea there is that you need it's going to have to be qualitative for these folks that don't have standardized tests in their subject areas. But that was the intent originally. But I agree, it has been now, by my misstep, has been tainted by its association with ASW.
Yeah, and to the point that you just made, in Tom's point, in preparation intro, we talked about the fact we use the phrase student impact. So we need to have evidence of student impact, and that EdTPA, for example, actually accounts for that in the EdTPA process, that there is evidence of student impact in the way an EdTPA analysis works. So Tom, yeah, you're right. I mean, all tape becomes Scotch tape.
Yeah, it's just, so it is, to get back to Maureen's question, or Maureen's statement, there is an option here for that can be explained to the state board. Is there a North Carolina option for that, as I would call these other things? Not at this time. Not on this list.
Not yet.
And this peer thing, I think needs to be fleshed out a little bit more, actually, to include some kind of student work. One of the conversations that was had in licensure that somebody brought up, which was a good point, was you should be having conversations with your principals, and I'm sure, and I know this happens, where you actually take in work and you actually talk about assessments of your students from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. So I think there's something there that should be added to peer around that would flesh that out, instead of it just being all external or all peer oriented, right? What's the teacher's role in peer except to be observed, right? What are they producing for the folks? So I think that's why we advocated to have it down here in this option, but it really needs another piece of student assessment work in there, and that needs to be fleshed out where it is has some reliability and validity in it, for at least in it's got to be fleshed out. I said it cannot be an exit ticket. That was my statement.
Thanks for bringing that up, Dr. Bullock. And I also think another thing, to kind of add on to that is going back to that piece of, again, these are tools that will be developed to help teachers find places to better meet the needs of their kids. And so in bringing in that student work or those classroom pieces that you're bringing in, truly helping teachers understand how to use the information they're getting from the data they're collecting on their students on their daily work, to help them drive instruction and to know exactly where their kids are so they know how to design instruction that meets their kids' needs. So I think if there's some way to capture that or articulate that, and again, a lot of that will come as these tools are fully fleshed out and developed, and we begin piloting them to really have teachers lean in on what's the best way to do that? What's the best way to assess the data? What's the best way to analyze? I think that there's a lot of room here for us to really design systems that give teachers the tools so that they're able to really find ways to truly meet the needs of every single student in their classrooms.
Back to you, Kim.
And then you can see that there were no changes with the license to with supports. I will say that the Budget and Compensation Subcommittee was talking about how to handle the amount of the professional advancement account. So I know that was in the works. I don't know if Dr. Graham wants to say anything about that.
Not much more than what you shared, Kim. The challenge for the Budget and Comp Subcommittee has been all along, as we kind of work through this process, we hear from other subcommittees about things that we should be adding into the Budget and Comp work, but we're hearing after the fact. So it's making it somewhat of a challenge. We're trying to account for all these moving pieces, but it is somewhat of a challenge trying to figure out exactly how to account for these things from a budgetary standpoint. So just sharing that as an observation, but nothing more to your point, Ken.
And Dr. Graham, the third bullet on that slide, which was discussed several times in prep and entry, is connected to a question you asked earlier, where it says in the MOU between the PSU and the EPP. So they're developing a partnership structure to be able to support the license one and license two person.
I want to say on the slide, this is Ann, that we've had two conversations in two different meetings regarding whether this license 2 and this is also about license 1, how long people should be able to stay in those licensure buckets, as I like to call them. So we've had a range of comments about that, and we have not come to any consensus. So if any other subgroup has a really valid idea about that, it might be time to bring it up.
And what's the kind of the debate point? What's the differentiation between a 2 or a 3? Like what's kind of hanging the group up in terms of the length of time?
Having too much time before having to show student impact. For license 1 in particular. Like the one recommendation in the past has been for 1 to 3 to be, total of 6 years. Some people like the idea of putting 2 and 3 together and letting 1 be kind of out on its own, right? Because you're the co-teacher of record. I guess this is just me speaking for me now. I also don't want us, I don't like it when DPI staff are tasked with coming up with loophole things because we don't give enough time for something, or there's not enough ramp time or whatever, and they have to do all this work to create a loophole for classroom teachers to stay in classrooms. So I just but it's effectiveness of teachers, it's being somewhere too long, or are we making it too short? So those are the general things that I would say. Kim, was there anything else that you remember?
No, I think you've covered it, Ann.
Okay, thanks.
And go ahead, Anthony.
No, I was going to say, could we not use the language of up to 3 years, which then allows for some flexibility? It seems like what we're after with a lot of what we're discussing is flexibility and agility. So if you say up to 3 years, if a person meets it in 1 year or 2 years, then so be it. If they take up to 3 years, then so be it. So that way it's kind of up to the individual, and it allows for that flexibility.
And the response has been, Anthony, I'm just going to tell you what this response has been to that. Well, anyone can jump licensure areas, right, if they've met the criteria, right? So you might be in license 1 and license 2 for a total of 2 years, maybe. You may not ever be in, you might jump to 3, all of those types of things. But if 1 and 2 are 3 years each, and 3 is 6 years, that's 12 years. I'm just stating an obvious fact here. And that just seems like a lot of time to get to a renewable license, as I will use that generic term, of level 4. That's what's been said.
Are we good with this slide?
I'm going to assume Ann's going to get us an answer to that question by Friday.
Yeah, Ann is saying the same thing Anthony's saying is, he's not saying this part, but like, I'm a 3 and 3 person just because it just seems conservative to me. And like, I just don't want us to be like 1 and then it goes into something and then DPI staff is tasked with school districts calling them, and because it's not enough time, right? I'm err on the caution of giving more time, but I'm not completely in charge. So, so.
Yeah, and Ann, I was joking about that question, but the point you made is quite profound. Can a person sort of be on their way to license 4 for 12 years? And I suspect that is not the intent of that, the way that is designed. And, I'm just wondering, so one is how long you can stay in any individual license prior to 4. And maybe there needs to be a composite requirement that once you enter into license 1, 2, or 3, you must achieve license 4 within 5 years.
Well, it wouldn't be any less than 6, but
Or 6.
Yeah, because license 3 is 6 years, is the recommendation is 6 years. You'll see that. So, I mean, it's just something that needs to be thought through in terms of, 12 years sounds ridiculous, right? Like it does. I mean, it's a point well taken, right? I mean, it gives you
Great
pause.
point. I think it's a great point.
And I think another really important consideration of how long teachers would be in each one of those licensure levels is what's the best thing for the kids in their classroom. Like, is it the best course of action for someone to take 12 years to get to a license 4? Like, I think we really need to kind of consider that as well, because ultimately what we want to do is help teachers be the best teachers they can be for the kids in their classrooms. But I mean, we're all fortunate enough to be here right now because there are 1.5 million kids enrolled in North Carolina public schools. So I think in any decisions we're making, we really need to consider what's best for the kids that are in the classrooms. And then let's design a way to have a system that's supporting those kids in their learning.
Well, our subcommittee we just have not come to what I consider we have not come to a motion that has passed. So on this, y'all think about it. It'll keep you up. Okay, thanks, Kim.
Now we're hitting license 3. And you can see at the top the completion of the traditional EPP program so there was discussion around passing the EdTPA as the checkpoint for that. But I didn't know if that was something that was decided upon. So that's why it says with no additional requirements, or if that will be something that the EPPs will implement.
Hank, I think we determined in our last meeting that a TPA or PPAT was a requirement.
It was going to be a requirement, yes.
Okay. So with passing the pedagogy assessment, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I think we had also worked in some language where that first offset bullet says one of the following. I think we ended up structuring that differently, so it was more of a menu of things rather than one of these things. But I have to go back and look at those notes.
Okay.
Hank, is that right?
Yeah, that's how I recall it as well. That this is a menu of possibilities, but that if you were coming to a traditional EPP, that this menu had to include one of those pedagogy exams.
Okay.
This is Tom. I'm sorry. Just so I'm clear. So this person wouldn't have any requirement to demonstrate content by any of the means that we've established here.
Yeah, they have to meet that second inset bullet. That's why I think, Hank, that was why we decided it couldn't be one, because there was an expectation in license 3 that you had actually met multiple, I don't remember the number, but multiple, but that EdTPA/PPAT was a requirement. One of those had to be the performance assessment.
Right, exactly.
Well, I think what I'm asking is think about the requirements, the competency requirements as being content and pedagogy. So are you saying that completing an EdTP, an approved EPP, and passing the EdTPA or PPAT satisfies all content and pedagogy requirements for that individual?
Ask that again.
So a person who completes a traditional EPP program and has passed the EdTPA as a result of, in conjunction with that completion of the EPP and passing the EdTPA as part of that preparation experience meets the requirements for content and pedagogy for that individual.
I keep on
arguing. I'm wondering.
I keep wanting to answer a different question.
Okay.
Which is that if you think about what we currently define as an EPP, what EPPs typically look like, that there are standards that are expected to be met, and there are multiple components of that. There's content component, there's a classroom practice component, there's pedagogical knowledge, those kinds of things. That prep and entry, I think, landed in, regardless of the structure of how you get there, meaning that EPPs might become more agile about how they give access to the knowledge base, you still had to meet the same standards, which means that there would be multiple indicators, which is why the one of the following became problematic. But that, for example, courses that have been traditionally used might in the future have a micro-credential option, but you still had to meet the standard expected in what we have traditionally called courses. Hank,
Oh, yeah, I hear what you're saying. And I think that's great, but that, to me, so I want to go, let's think about how it is right now. You come out of an EPP, preferably you've passed EdTPA as part of that, and you've passed your praxis, and you would go to a license 3.
Yes.
The way I think I'm hearing this is you complete the EPP and you've passed the EdTPA as part of that, and you come out and you don't have any other requirement such as taking the praxis or doing micro-credentials related to content knowledge or demonstrating your content knowledge through the peer process or using EVOS to show that you've met the content requirement. That's what I'm getting at are we saying these completers don't have to meet any other of the content requirements in this list because that has been satisfied by completion of the traditional EPP? But it sounded like what you were saying, Dr. Dempsey, was, well, just like the pedagogy is embedded in our preparation, we would embed some of those requirements into the programs themselves. But I want to make sure I'm understanding it, that you have to embed some kind of content demonstration, or for these folks in particular, we just don't require that.
So, we know that research indicates that the praxis doesn't correlate to effective teaching practice, but I may not. My expertise is not in researching EPPs, but is there any research that indicates that students who graduate from an EPP are effective based on what they've learned in their coursework and content? Does anybody know?
We've said pretty consistently throughout this process that the most successful route to becoming a teacher in terms of impact on student learning is through an EPP. And that comment has been made since January of 21, and I've not heard it refuted anywhere.
Right, absolutely. And so really the point I was trying to make in asking that question, Dr. Dempsey, and I shouldn't have asked it as a question, was, I think there probably is some strong evidence that students who come out of an EPP have the content that they need to be a successful practitioner. That was kind of the point I was trying to make in asking that question, but I probably asked it in a very convoluted way.
No, that's okay. And Hank, I'm going to try to paraphrase the committee, that a person who comes out of an EPP that has the professional capacity to have that impact is a person that has provided evidence of their knowledge of their content or content areas, their knowledge of pedagogy, their ability to exhibit that on a performance assessment, such as at TPA. They have increasingly complex levels of application of their knowledge in what we call field experiences in EPPs. And that has traditionally stayed pretty uniform in EPPs over time. Moving forward, there can be variation in the structures. So micro-credential instead of a course, how potentially different ways of exhibiting content mastery as opposed to the way you using a praxis exam. But that evidence has to be present in order to acquire license 3. That the standard cannot be the standard is expected. How you provide the evidence could have multiple forms. Hank, isn't that sort of? I'm thinking Christine O'Connor and several of those meetings talking about there can be variation in the type of evidence, but there cannot be variation in the presence. That their evidence must be there in order for it to be called license 3.
That what you just said, Dr. Dempsey, makes a lot. I mean, both things make sense to me. I'm not arguing whether what it should be. I'm just trying to get clarity on,
Yeah, Tom. Let me after the meeting go back and pull those notes, and I might have to ask Kim to help me find them. But I'm pretty confident what I just framed is where we ended up, and the answer to the way you were asking about the framing is yes.
Okay, all right.
But it's not PPAT. It's not EdTPA and PPAT now stand for everything. No, it's EdTPA, as an example, is a specific expectation among others.
Right. So, what if I think I'm hearing you? An EPP could do their program and prepare those students to do the micro credentials for content and pedagogy, and they satisfy those pre-service. They could move to a license 3, or
hypothetically.
Doesn't matter how you demonstrate it, but what we're saying is the EPP in order to move from completion of it can't be the way it is now, where you're moving out of an EPP and you didn't do your praxis or your EdTPA initially. Then you're not moving into you didn't do some kind of demonstration of content and pedagogy embedded in that EPP. Correct. You can't move to a license 3. If you completed a traditional program with those things embedded, then you would move to a license 3.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Yes. All right. That helps. Thank you.
And if let's say you finished everything, but you didn't pass EdTPA, you can be licensed 2, but you can't be licensed 3.
Dr. Dempsey, I want to let you know that I put those notes on the top of your email right now.
Thank you so much, because it would have taken me years to find them. Tom, I think thank you, Kim, and the way you asked that question is excellent, and it's this difference between the expectation for license 3. There was a question on the table at one point: could UNC Wilmington say, this is what we call license 3, and if a person meets all those expectations, they're license 3. And the conversation in the prep and entry committee was not so fast. There's got to be validation that comes in multiple forms, that a person has the knowledge, skills, and dispositions to be able to teach. And so we talked a lot in CAPE accreditation language, and that while accreditation wasn't the issue, the expected standards of practice were for license 3. So if you didn't pass EdTPA coming out of your program, and that is a requirement for license for that, you're not licensed 3 yet. I think we're saying the same thing, Tom.
All right. Yeah, that is very helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
Kim, I wanted to point out that on this slide, it still has the language qualitative growth review, and that needs to be struck.
Okay, I made a note.
Can you back up 1 second, Kim? So a person who's holding a classified TA position potentially, and I would say likely, does not yet hold a classified TA position. Does that require a bachelor's degree, completion of a bachelor's degree?
No, it does not.
So the assumption would be that you can show all kinds of evidence of practice, but until you complete a bachelor's degree, you're not eligible for license 4. Because if you back up to the slide before that one, Kim.
No, this is for, so you can hold a TA position while you're trying to complete the license, the requirements.
Oh, I got, you can be a TA.
Yes.
And
if you end up being a non-completer, then you could hold a TA position while you're trying to complete if you expire on the years. Does that make sense?
So I'm wondering if non-completer is the problem here. That makes me think of completing an EPP/baccalaureate degree. And what we really mean is folks who don't successfully meet the requirements to move to a license 4 may hold a classified position in order to complete those requirements.
But
because you'll see that on other slides too for license 2 and license 1 ban.
But a non-completer of license 3,
correct,
Mm-hmm.
Who is an MAT student could also be a license 1 or 2, not just a TA.
So what I think so.
I mean, I read that as if something happens and you don't complete all the requirements for license 3, you've now been told you can be a TA, but you actually have other options. I guess it's the singularness of TA that's catching my eye.
Dan, this is Wesley. Do we just need to take that line out, because that's kind of insinuating that a school district would move someone or is required to move someone into a TA position? But you're right; they've got many options, whether it's a TA or going back to license 1 or license 1 or license 2 requirements. I'm thinking that line just needs to come out.
So just to clarify, though, teachers cannot move backward in this model, correct? Like you can't, you would never be moved from a license 3 to a license 2. Once you achieve the license 3, you stay in the license 3. I don't think there's any backward movement or demoting of teachers from one license to a lower license level once they've achieved a license level.
Yeah, Tom's point just clicked. If after 6 years at license 3, you have not resolved any issues to move to license 4, you can't go backwards. You can't go to 1 or 2, but you can go to TA. Tom, that was your point.
Yes, the license expires. And, you know, I think this is an interesting point of whether this model moves forward and backward, but I don't think we ever contemplated that. So.
Yeah, Wesley, it probably does fix it if you just delete the line, but I do think, you know, sort of in the sense that we don't want people to unintentionally disappear from the pipeline. People in the situation, Wesley, that this describes could move into those TA positions. And this gets back to Ann's question earlier about you've been licensed 3 for 6 years, and if you were licensed 1 before that, then you don't get everything resolved. Could you go back to license 2 and sort of? And Maureen's point is, well, no, actually, you're not allowed to go backwards in the licensure process, so you couldn't do that.
I'm just wondering if that's just, you know, a given obvious. I mean, I think school districts will try their absolute best to keep those people in the pipeline, and if there's opportunities for them to be TAs, to move them in there. Maybe it's a good talking point that's communicated, but I don't know if it needs to be specifically in the model per se, but just a good talking point for districts to consider.
So, Dr. Wood, I think that's an excellent point, because what we're trying to show here is that every exit off-ramp and circles back and has a way to become an on-ramp. That's the intent. So if it's too narrow to say something like that, because you're right, LEAs have all kinds of options to employ unlicensed folks, that we don't want to dictate to somebody that this is the way it has to be. You could pay them locally. You could, do other things. So I think your point is well taken. The purpose of that statement is to show that every off-ramp in the licensure system circles back to become an on-ramp. However that's best articulated, we can make those changes.
And so maybe we just need to say something that's kind of like, a broader, if you're unable to meet these in 6 years, then you will be supported and by your school district or something, some way to make it apparent that we're not saying that you're expected to leave the profession at that point. We're just saying that there would be supports in place that would be coming to you from the adult leadership classroom excellence teacher and your school district to help you complete those requirements to move to license 4.
Yeah, and I would just be careful of not pigeonholing, a district into being required or guaranteed to provide those supports in the event that it's, not a person that there's a reason why they haven't completed those requirements.
That's right, Dr.
I'll just leave it.
I don't want to put I don't want to put any LEA on the hook for improving folks that are uninclined to improve. That's tough. So
and hopefully they wouldn't have got to that point anyway in the process, but just a talking point.
So if it's okay, Kim and I will work on the language on this.
Yes.
And get you something a little more palatable.
Thank you, Tom.
We'll also do that for licenses 1 and 2, because that is also stated for licenses 1 and 2. Any other thoughts on this slide? Now license 4.
So, Kim, my first question is that 3 qualifying years within a 5-year window, does that need to be changed to a 6-year window?
No, not for license 4. That was license 3.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's right. I'm sorry. My bad.
No worries.
We just need the here in the qualitative growth review. We just need to copy the edits from. However we edit that, we need to edit it here.
Will do. Any other thoughts, or should I move ahead?
Just one minor edit. Under supports, it should be adult leadership, not adult learning coaching.
Thank you, Dr. Graham. Slide 17. Okay. Okay, I'll move us ahead. Second part of license 4, this is more about renewal. And then we added the salary increase at 1%. And in addition, there was a PDF doc that was a Word doc that gives more detail, but I didn't want to cram it onto the slide. So it's still within that Word doc or / PDF doc, so that it was with this. If there's any questions on that, I can also bring that up as well.
Kim, since we're still including the National Board Certified Teacher Pay, I know one thing that had come up in advancement and development was potentially using National Board Certified Teacher renewal, which would align with the 5-year renewal that we're looking at for this license, for teachers to be able to use that process and that renewal process as one of their evidences of impact on students. I don't know whether that's something that would be more in the implementation phase, or whether that's something we should look at now as an additional option for teachers to be able to use as evidence.
My sense on that, Maureen, is if you want it to be, if this committee wants it to be a way to demonstrate impact on students, you need to articulate it in this plan.
So I'll just throw out my personal feelings on it. I am not a nationally board certified teacher to start off with, but I do know that my friends who have gone through that process, it is an incredible professional development and learning process for them. And many of the different components of what they need to complete would be similar to what we'd be kind of looking at them completing for some of the impacts on students in a positive way. And so I would advocate for having that be an option for teachers to be able to use that as their evidence, but I will leave that up to the rest of the group to also weigh in.
Maureen, I agree with you. We've done a lot of work with National Board Certified Teachers, and there's a lot of impact on student learning that you have to evidence throughout the process, as well as reflect on your own practice. So I would be in favor of adding that additional bullet point.
Yeah, in that, because National Board is, to the point you both just made, but also because it is so clearly connected to the in-task progression model, which, by the way, Kim, I can't remember if we said we needed to go back and pick that up in some of the earlier slides. That number one is there, and then number two is what Dr. Graham just said. There is research that shows that National Board just completing the process has a positive impact on student learning, whether you get certified or not.
I would also support that, especially since EdTPA is a mini model of that.
Yep.
They actually correlate together, so it seemed like we would want to include both. So that's a good point.
Everybody, the methods to renew the license, that inset bullet micro credentials, do we need to be that specific? Micro credentials offered by the district? I mean, do we literally mean only the ones offered by the district? And I think this is where that CEU question probably starts to come up again. There could be multiple providers of the micro credentials. The issue is they have to be reviewed and approved. They can't, if a district says we call this a micro credential, or a university for that matter says we call this a micro credential, are we going to call it a micro credential?
That is a great point. I think a better word there might be approved by the district, because
Right.
what I don't think we want to do is take away the district's ability to direct PD if they have a certain initiative. So I think approved would take care of that.
And then the bullet after that, traditional PD, could we, and this is back to Dr. Graham's question earlier, professional development offered by the PSU, NEPP, or other approved providers? Because we do a lot of professional development in collaboration with our regional districts. But they many times they're co-planned, but they come from the university, not specifically from the school district. So that
I think the same word change would take care of that.
Yeah.
Change offered to approve.
Yeah. Kim, I can help you with that if you need to. Is it, can I ask a question about the annual salary increase bullet? If, I know this might sound absurd, but let's say this gets, PEPSC makes this recommendation, state board supports this recommendation, it goes to the General Assembly. And in any given year, there's a 1% salary increase, but it happens the General Assembly says all state employees get a 5% pay raise. The assumption would be it's 1% or the annual state pay raise, whichever is higher. I was thinking about that when I was reading the compensation document. That, I don't know, Tom and others, I don't know if that language could get tricky, but does it need to be qualified?
This is Aaron. I do think we need, and I apologize, I'm on the road here. I do think we need to clarify that. Now, my understanding is it would be 1 plus the legislative increase, because the 1 is always built into the salary schedule. But if I am wrong in that, please correct me.
That's my interpretation as well, Dr. Fleming, is 1 plus.
Okay.
That was my interpretation as well when I read through everything.
I think we're all in agreeing how we're viewing it. I mean, the question is, can we get the General Assembly to view it that way? I mean, I think experience tells us that they do a lot of stuff to either, in the end, they're going to do whatever it is that they think they need to be doing. So if we say it's 1% plus and they give all state employees a 5% pay raise, they can certainly carve out, oh, actually teachers only get 4%. They've done things like that in the past. So I don't think that we can do anything to prevent any kind of manipulation on this.
Well, I don't mean prevent it, Tom. So, I mean, back to Aaron's point, so much as to say, what was the intent of the subcommittee?
I got you.
Yeah. And if the subcommittee's intent was to say 1% plus any statewide salary increases, I think we need to say that, and then the process will play out. Aaron, is that what the committee's intent was?
Anthony will say yes. That's the intent of the subcommittee.
Yeah, I think we should say that in the. My suggestion, Anthony, is we say that in the bullet what the intent was.
Agreed. I think the more explicit we can be, then the better off it'll serve us downrange. So I agree completely.
Any other comments?
If unsuccessful, the license is renewed for 5 years with CEUs. That's the other piece of this. So it's not saying CEUs lead to salary increases. It's saying the license is renewed.
Correct. And you'll see that question mark there, that question in parentheses, is salary increase contingent on successful renewal. And I think that's a discussion point for us. But from my vantage point, there is no salary increase if unsuccessful, but that's Anthony Graham's interpretation. That's my thought process.
Minus the 1% annual increase, though, correct, Dr. Graham? Like you would still get the 1% annual increase whether
Correct.
you successfully renew or not, correct?
That's correct.
And then the 5,000 increase no longer exists. Is that correct, Dr. Graham?
That's my understanding, Kim.
Yes, that's what I thought as well. But I wanted to make sure.
I'm back. I apologize. I hung up on everybody. The 5,000 would be gone. It is the intent of the committee from the vote to do the 1% plus. So I apologize if you've moved on from that, but that was the intent. Now, the General Assembly can certainly do whatever they want, but that is the recommendation of the committee.
And so if you're a license 4, you can hold at license 4 by taking CEUs, but you don't get any salary increases other than the 1%.
That's correct.
Got it. Okay. I think that's been a sticking point in some other conversations I've been in.
Mm-hmm.
So can I ask what other salary increase there would be?
The stipend for CE and AL?
I don't know what that is.
Sorry, on the next two slides. No, I understand, but on the next two slides, it talks about changing the salary for CE and AL to a stipend. So I didn't know if that would be maybe what the increase would be.
And Tom, those two bullets, the one that starts, if unsuccessful, the license is renewed. And then the next bullet says successful renewal comes with 5,000. So one might read technically that, well, wait a minute, my license got renewed with CEUs, which means I met these successful renewal stipulations. So where's my $5,000 raise? So I think
Right. So does that need to be removed?
Yeah, that's Kim. I think Dr. Graham and Dr. Fleming confirmed that successful license 4 comes with 5,000 increase in salary. That's to be stricken.
Okay.
Okay. I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
So, but I think we need to articulate in this. I think if what we're saying is if you don't meet the effectiveness portion of the renewal, but you do the CEUs, then your license is renewed for 5 years. I think we need to strike that, but no salary increase, because that's just going to be confusing. Because what I'm hearing you saying is you still get the 1%. I think, Maureen, that's a separate issue. If you qualify, I don't know how one could qualify for a license for CE or an AL if you're not meeting the effectiveness standard. So I think it would just cause confusion in the field if we couched it this way. Does that make sense?
It does, Tom. I'm following you, and I'm trying to think through language, but I'm following exactly what you're saying. Because
So
essentially, if you put the two paths together, one isn't successful, one is successful, but they're both entitled to the 1% increase.
That's right.
So nothing new or additional happens necessarily for the person who is successful, other than they have the option to then look at the advanced teacher roles, whereas the unsuccessful would not. That's the only difference between the two pathways as I'm sitting here thinking through it.
Yeah, I think that's...
In the implementation phase, would there be an opportunity maybe for us to look at, like, for that teacher who is unsuccessful and is renewing only on CEUs and not meeting the expected growth targets, maybe finding some way to build in some additional supports for that teacher to make sure that, and ideally, we get to a point where we don't have any teachers that are unsuccessful because the supports that we're building into the system work, and we're able to help teachers so that we don't have somebody that doesn't meet the expected growth 3 out of 5 years. But maybe just like putting a pin in that to consider as we move forward, that we want to make sure that we are designing a system that's helping teachers be better teachers and that they're fully supported in their practice. And so, like, not just kind of leaving them out there that if they weren't successful in renewing, we're like, okay, cool, high five, just use your CEUs, but like really being intentional in the way that we're designing our support so that we're helping that teacher so that they are meeting those growth expectations.
I agree with you, Maureen. I think if this moves forward, there would have to be some policy related to what happens with a teacher in the renewal cycle immediately following what we're calling an unsuccessful renewal cycle, in terms of meeting effectiveness. That has to be there. Yes, I don't know if we want to try to build that into the model right now, but that's a great question. I mean, I see what you're saying, and it absolutely will have to be part of this. I just don't know if it's, you guys need to direct whether that needs to be included now or if we can wait until implementation.
Tom, in addition to what you just said, that, or maybe an extension of what you just said, maybe now we need to, work on some language that we can develop pretty quickly, because this is an important sort of situation, and we need to be clear, because the casual reader out in the world is not going to have the benefit of this background conversation. And so I think a little bit more clarity will help. I'd also suggest, Kim, in that bullet where it says if unsuccessful, that we add the words at demonstration of effectiveness.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah. And then the point Tom just made would be a follow-up to what happens when you don't successfully demonstrate effectiveness.
Yeah, I agree. I think teachers are going to look at this and say, well, what happens? And I think that's going to be huge for teachers. Like, what are you going to do for me if I didn't meet your newfangled, renewal process? And I think that needs to be articulated. So I'll work with Kim on some language on that. I want to make it as vague as possible, because I don't want to pin down anything, but something to the effect that, districts will provide support, or PSUs will provide support for these folks, leveraging the existing support services they have for early career teachers, or something to that effect. Just
yeah. Yeah, I don't think it requires specificity at this point, but I think we want to avoid ambiguity.
Yeah, I agree.
As much as possible.
Hi, all. Do you need me to change slides? I'm sorry, I had to take a little break there.
Nope. I was just about to say you're remarkably patient working through this.
Oh, thanks. So we're going to license for classroom excellence.
Kim, can we go back to that previous slide just real quick? I want to make sure did you hear all the comments we made?
That last couple minutes, I did not.
Okay. So we need
being recorded?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, never mind then. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Not to cut you off, Tom, but Kim's a busy woman, so
I got you. So Drs. Graham and Fleming, I was not at the subcommittee, the budget and compensation meeting where this was decided. So this was approved by the subcommittee, right? The 5,000 and on the next one, I think 10,000.
If I recall, I thought it was approved in one of the earlier meetings, not the last one, but
it was the last one where
was it?
They said it would be a flat 5,000 for classroom excellence, and then a flat 10,000.
That is correct for the two upper levels. Yes.
All right. So I just wanted to. Would it be helpful for this committee with the 1,000? Not the 1,000, the 1% increase and the 5 and 10,000. And you guys will be done with the subcommittees for at least for a while when we were able to do this, but it would be helpful to circle back with y'all to give you an indication of what that looks like in our kind of costing model that we've done for you.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's the best way to be informed too, so we'll know what it's ultimately going to cost or require in new money.
Okay, we can do that.
So I did have a quick question about the hard dollar amount as opposed to the percentage. Will there be any way to somehow also make that number adjust with inflation? Just because $5,000 today is going to look distinctly different from $5,000 in 10 years.
Maureen, we did not discuss any type of adjustment to the flat amount there for inflation purposes. Our conversation was the flat dollar amount.
It would, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe that would adjust in the license 4 salary schedule. So as that adjusted over time, it would be 5,000 on top of that.
Exactly.
Any other comments?
Ann, are you still on?
I am.
That I think you back. There you go. Other reliable and valid qualitative or quantitative methods. That sentence ends not yet developed. Would you mind? I think you were the one who wrote that. Can we say to be identified or developed?
I think we could say could be identified or developed.
Okay.
We're not saying that we just don't want to close the door, right?
Right.
But we're not saying, weren't saying that they had to be developed, but I think we could say could.
Could. Okay.
Yeah, sure. Wesley, are you still on there? Are you good with that?
I'm good with that.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, okay, very good.
Could they be existing tools that we just haven't identified?
Yes. Yeah. We just know that there's probably something that will get developed, and we wanted to leave the door open.
Yeah.
So another thing too, and this is also on the slide before, on the level 4, and then also I think in the 1, 2, and 3, this might be something too. I know there's been a lot of talk around using INTASC standards. And I don't know if maybe we want to put something like, because everywhere right now we have NESIS. Did we want to put anything in on any of these slides to give us the kind of, I guess, the autonomy or the latitude to potentially switch to using INTASI or something similar to INTASI, or is that not something that we think we need to do?
So INTASC is correlated with the North Carolina Professional Teacher Standards, which is correlated with the NECs. Those are all correlated. So we might want, but Maureen, based on your point, we might want to say something about, I don't think we really clearly identified the North Carolina, what I call the North Carolina Professional Teaching Standards, which are the 5 standards. I don't know that we actually use that language in here anywhere.
Yeah, I don't think we did either. And then there's also the leadership standards as well, that maybe we should clarify that language as well.
Yeah. I mean, we probably should just go from, and I apologize if I'm not using the right words for the North Carolina 5 standards, if I'm not, but that's really what they're built on. So maybe that might be a recommendation of the language. Those 2 things, right? Good.
Okay. Are we good with this slide? Okay.
Say, Kim, down at the bottom of that slide,
Sure.
same language where we refer specifically to the PSU as if we prep and entry, I think, was more general than that around partnerships and collaborations. Clearly, the PSU is at the center of that, but I mean, it could be identified by versus from on these supports.
Okay. Any thoughts on this slide?
Can we, in the one could meet the license for requirements, do we need to modify that to say, but not seek or meet? I mean, is the assumption that a license for person will make a professional choice at some point? Well, let me ask that as a question. Is a license for person going to need to sort of declare, I'm seeking 5 and 6, or is that automatically something that emerges in a review process? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. The way licensure is in the state of North Carolina is a property right, so we can't modify it without the license holder's permission to. So to answer your question, they would have to seek that. We could not automatically designate somebody as who's a license for. We couldn't automatically roll them up to a license for CE or AL. So your point is well taken. They would have to apply for that.
The last bullet can't, salary differential only comes with employment in the role. That when if a person moves to license 5 or 6, and then later steps back to license 4, they don't. I know that bullet the intention of that bullet is you don't carry the salary backwards. A person the only time you can move, quote, backwards in licensure is you could move back to license 4. I mean, you could be in a license 4 role. You decide not to do the work of an advanced teacher. Correct?
That's right. And the way you've constructed this, the use of the term stipend is pretty important in this, because that would not, because it's a stipend, it does not trigger a loss of salary. A stipend is not salary. So you're avoiding the demotion, salary reduction requirements in law. But there's another side to that too. This stipend would not count towards retirement credit. I mean, for the purposes of establishing your average annual income, that 4-year measurement they do. So the way, because we're calling it a stipend, by definition, it would not increase the teacher's retirement benefit.
It's a question that came up in the governor's teacher advisory council, that as you move, as a person's responsibilities shift from 4 to 5 and 6, and then 5 and 6 back to 4, you become a classroom teacher who's not carrying on advanced responsibilities. The differentiation in salary is tied to being appointed as an advanced teacher, not having met the conditions of being an advanced teacher. That makes sense, Tom?
Yeah, but I would not agree with that statement. The way that this was constructed, and again, I'm just telling you how I'm thinking about this from licensure and employment. You have to hold the license, that is the AL license, to be in an AL position.
Right.
But holding the AL license itself without the position doesn't qualify you for the salary differential.
Right. But if you hold the license and there's a position available and you take it, that's not a permanent appointment. That's an appointment during the term you're doing the work. So if you then later step back into a classroom as a person whose primary responsibility is a classroom teacher, you don't take that license 6 salary back with you.
That is correct. That is correct.
Right. And that's what I mean. I'm just saying it has come up in other, focus group kinds of things I've been in, that when you get into license 5 and 6, that salary differential is contingent upon serving in the role, not just having met the conditions of the license.
That is my understanding of the way the model currently works, yes.
Yeah, we might need to tweak that one a little bit, given that question has come up, but I think that's a relatively easy thing to write.
And Dr. Dempsey, I think a good example that currently exists of what you're kind of describing right now is people that are serving in AP roles that choose to go back to a classroom teacher role. So they would still hold the administrator's license, but they would no longer be making the pay increase difference that you get for being an AP versus being a classroom teacher. So it's a very similar system to what we currently have when teachers move from an administrator position into a classroom teacher position. They would not take the pay differential with them. They would move into the pay scale of the position that they're currently filling.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And does the final bullet and sub bullet not make that clear, Dr. Dempsey? Is that what you're saying?
It's written confusingly. When I had to read it several times, and I knew what it meant. So it is written somewhat confusingly. So I do think we need to clean up the language a little bit.
All right. In defense of Kim, that's my prose, not hers. So I'll work on that.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah.
Thanks, Tom. We're good with moving on to advanced teacher adult leadership. Any comments here other than remove qualitative growth review?
And Peter.
And Pierre, yes, we will update that. Thank you, Dr. Graham.
This text is drafted primarily by the advancement subcommittee, is that, or license, which?
It was a kind of part advancement and development and part licensure, but so we did kind of the broad competencies, and then licensure did the specifics on the like what the reliable and valid qualitative or quantitative methods would be, and then also on the peer.
Well, yeah, I'm not quite sure to whom this question might be addressed. So on the adult leadership part of this is sort of back to the partnership language that an adult leadership role be someone in a district who works with a university partnership in the support and supervision of interns and educator preparation students. And let's say New Hanover County and UNCW created a hybrid role. Then we would want to build the option for how that person comes to learn that knowledge base into the one of the following. Is that now, Tom? I don't, and everybody, I don't know if that, what I'm assuming an adult leader could be, it actually is credible. But a person who's a supervising teacher, we've traditionally called them, could be an adult leadership role. So,
Dr. Dempsey, this is kind of my personal opinion. And so anyone who doesn't agree with this, please just, say something. But I think that role that you're describing with the cooperating teacher or supervising teacher will be better filled by the classroom excellence teacher, which is the level 4 CE that we talked about on the last slide. Okay. Because these adult leadership teachers, while they will be in classrooms every day, their role is shifting from being the person who's giving like the primary imparter of knowledge to students. They're shifting from that to supporting the other teachers in their building in their ability to be effective practitioners with their students. So they're going to be more kind of there supporting the teachers, potentially doing model teaching or co-teaching, or helping a teacher by polling small group, or helping with some data analysis so that teachers are able to understand what they need to do to meet some of the needs of the kids in their classrooms. Okay. But they would be more kind of like floating around classrooms continuously throughout the day, supporting other teachers in their building, where that classroom excellence teacher would be the teacher of record who would have a roster of students who they would be working with every day. And so I think that for anyone who's coming in as a pre-service teacher, they would probably be better served by being in that classroom excellence teacher's classroom, because then they would be watching a teacher doing the normal teaching practice things that they will then be doing once they graduate and have a classroom of their own.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful.
This says the same thing as the classroom excellence about the salary differential. So any changes on that slide will be made here as well. But any other comments on this slide? And that's the end. Any other thoughts that were left out that you thought about later? as we've gone through all of the slides.
And this is Wesley. I brought this up, and I think in our subcommittee and other meetings as well. But we're going to have to figure out a way to look at our current staff who are already serving as these adult leadership roles, such as instructional coaches, instructional specialists that do not have that are already in those roles. Are we going to make them provide some type of data to move through this licensure process, or is there going to be, we need to be thinking or do we want to consider ways for them to kind of grandfather into a license 4 or 5 role? Just something being on my mind a lot, just thinking about our current district and how we have things set up in our district. We have those individuals in those roles that are not currently in teaching positions to gather the data that may be needed to continue in their position, if that makes sense.
Dr. Wood, I am so sorry, but I totally missed that whole question, and I'm feeling like
just saying, I shared this before, I think, with our subcommittee and some other meetings as well. But currently, we have 22 individuals in our district, one for each of our schools, that are currently serving as in this adult leadership role. As a full-time instructional coach / mentor to our teachers. And, I'm just thinking we've got to figure out a way or discuss some way for these individuals to be able to continue in those roles and fit into this licensure model, because they are classified as instructional support. So they're currently not in a classroom, teaching and gathering data and artifacts that would be needed to move through this model to place them at a level 4 or level 5. And I'm sure there's other school districts out there as well that are in the same situation. I know we've talked about student support services, so looking at that later down the road, but those positions have been on my mind as we've went through these discussions.
Yeah. So my thought on this is so fundamentally different than the way what the current system is, that there's going to have to be a pretty substantial integration period. And so I think, I hate to say this because I know people get tired of me saying it, but that's really when we're ready to implement, we need to think about, okay, who are currently serving these roles, because the idea of these roles is not new. It's just the way that we're going about identifying people who have, who should be holding these roles. That's going to have to come with how do you make that transition, and I think that's going to take a lot of time, because these folks are going to have a sufficient amount of time to demonstrate the standards, the competencies as we define that. And I just think that's going to take a really long time for integration. And because I'm with you, we can't, it's not right just to go in and say, you're out because you don't hold a license for AL. I mean, we can't be doing that. So I don't know the answer, but I know it's part of the complication of implementing this model, that concurrent implementation of this model with our existing method. And I don't have a solution right now, but I understand what you're talking about.
Dr. Wood, I don't know if this is necessarily a solution, but maybe just an idea and possibility for solution. But, we've talked a lot about the importance of having pilot programs that have practitioners that are involved at every level of helping us really fine tune and develop all the different tools and the effectiveness measures and make sure that they work well for teachers and for the students in their classrooms. I'm wondering if we could take a similar approach and look at districts that already do have really well developed programs with instructional coaches like you're describing, and look at ways to build out the kind of the effectiveness piece for them. So, several months ago, Dr. Tomberlin had talked about how we would need to, especially for the adult leadership teachers, that because they won't be the teacher of record in classrooms with kids that they are directly tied to for instruction, that we would need to develop some other kind of indicator or metric to establish how well they're doing in their job. And essentially that would probably come from something similar to, are they helping the teachers who they're working with grow the students that are in those teachers' classrooms? So maybe we could look at some of those districts like yours that already have really robust programs built out with instructional coaches as the pilots to kind of determine, like, how does that look? How does that work? Can we develop measures that are helping those instructional coaches ensure that they're meeting the needs of the teachers they're working with? So just an idea of maybe one of the ways that we could take existing programs and kind of encompass them in that transition period, and involve those people that are serving in those roles currently and understand how those roles work and with the different supports they're giving to teachers, and helping us to build out a program that's really good that we are able to utilize statewide. Because while it's awesome that we do have so many districts that have really robust instructional coaching programs, we also have some districts that don't, mostly because they can't financially afford it. And so by having the opportunity to support that from the state level, that means that all of the districts statewide would have the same opportunity to have those really great instructional coaches that you guys have in your LEA.
Kim is 3:30, just for everybody.
Okay. So my next steps is to update this further. Dr. Dempsey, I will touch base with you, as we indicated earlier, going through the slideshow. If you find that you have other edits as you go through this, because you do have a copy minus markouts for QGR, please reach out and let me know if you need to talk over the phone. Send me a copy of what you think the edit should be. So I'm available to discuss anything as well as receive it via email.
Kim, I know we're at the very end of the meeting, but just wanted to throw out two more things real quick, just to make sure they're still part of the discussion. Number one is for retired teachers. We talked about that in advancement and development in July, to make sure there's some kind of way for them to have license renewal. And then also we'll need some kind of caveat or like alternative system, and it might be the CEU system, for anyone who's currently not teaching in a classroom for whatever reason, like if they've taken a leave of absence for childcare or for any other reasons, that they would still be able to renew their certificate. So that when they chose to come back to the classroom, they could have a valid certificate.
Thank you, Maureen. Those are two good points, and they have been discussed previously. So please reach out if you think of anything else. And Dr. Dempsey, I'll be reaching out to you.
Okay.
And I will send out another copy of this once everything has been updated.
Yeah, if I may say in closing, 18 months or whatever it's been since we started this, and how many meetings and thousands of hours and the documents. And while we have a lot of clarity to reach and refining to do, Kim, the thing you pulled together is remarkably clear when it represents that scope of work. We got more work to do, but I really appreciate the effort to pull it together.
Well, it is a team effort between Dr. Tomberlin, Dr. Seiberg, and myself. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Thanks, everybody.